right, looks like we're ready to get started here. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Oh, hi. Like Dr. Nick. Yeah, my name is Mark Milhouse. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Currently, I'm a principal software architect by day. I'm into cycling and rock climbing and traveling and stuff like that. Something worth noting, I'm not a cybersecurity professional. I'm actually mostly just here for the shenanigans. So this year, won the SecretCon after-party casino heist, along with some of my partners in crime over here, almost literally. Last year, the DEF CON tinfoil hat competition, which was a lot of fun. Also, some other shenanigans here, QR Hell, and DEF CON photos, which we did last year, and we're going to be repeating again this upcoming year. So my LinkedIn is up there, and the QR code there, if you want to scan it, just takes you to my LinkedIn. And there's a picture of me with more shenanigans. Also, the stuff that doesn't fit on the slide, I'm an ex-Amazon software engineer. Actually, I wasn't planning on wearing this, but it's colder than I expected. This is from Prime Video, which was the team that I worked on. We got to work on Thursday Night Football, which was a lot of fun. I was the CTO of Truckers Network and 160 Driving Academy. I worked in privacy and cybersecurity investigator at a law firm called Edelson that did class action lawsuits. I've been involved in humanitarian relief and refugee support in the Ukraine crisis. And also, speaking of shenanigans, just so you know, the first slide here and a lot of the slides that you're going to see, the images were AI generated, and I just did that for the fun. So before we start, we've got the traditional boilerplate. I'm not qualified to give legal, medical, investment, or spiritual advice. My girlfriend said, or any other advice for that matter. This talk does contain techniques that you can try in the wild. It's worth saying I'm not encouraging you to break the law. It's up to you to understand the risks and decide safety and legality and ethics for yourself. Everyone always says, don't test without permission, make sure you follow the laws. You're going to hear Johnny say that later today. I'm not saying that you should test without permission, but sometimes it's not that clear-cut. Just make sure you're safe, ethical, and you understand the impact of what you're doing. Also, if you're interested in any of the data, tools, or concepts from this talk, be sure to reach out to me. I'll put my LinkedIn back up at the end of the presentation, or you can talk to me afterwards. Some of this stuff might be interesting to some people, especially if you work for major corporations. So happy to share, happy to help where I can. But yeah, so bear with me for a moment while we take a brief journey together. The year's 2009, and you're in your brand new Toyota Prius, cruising down the highway on your way from picking up Avatar from Blockbuster, and you're headed over to Radio Shack to pick up the new BlackBerry Storm. You're rocking out to the hit new single Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus, or maybe Put a Ring on It by Beyonce. And your speed is picking up, and you think to yourself, is my lead foot really that bad? So you ease off the accelerator, but the car keeps going faster until you hit 120 miles an hour and you lose control of the vehicle. The brakes don't work, you end up crashing, losing your precious new Prius and your dash-mounted Garmin GPS. Realistically, this is actually something that happened to quite a few people. If you haven't heard of it before, there's a great Radiolab episode about this. And it wasn't because of car hackers, surprisingly enough, or at least not that we know of, right? But between 2009 and 2011, many Toyota and Lexus cars had open throttle issues or brakes that didn't work. And Toyota and Lexus actually recalled over 9 million cars because of this. It led to dozens of fatalities. It was over 30 fatalities. And officially, these were reported as user error, faulty throttles, floor mats, or anti-lock braking software issues. So why is NASA on this slide that AI so generously created for me? It's because the NHTSA actually brought NASA in to help rule out whether it was potentially cosmic rays that had caused this issue. And there's quite a few people that still believe, including that Radiolab episode that I mentioned before, there's quite a few people that still believe that it actually might have been cosmic rays. And yeah, so that's something, if you're looking for something to listen to on the ride home, check it out. It's really interesting. I'll put that up on the references at the end. But don't worry, right? At that time and still, we have many mitigations available, right? We have error correcting code, we have redundant systems, we have radiation hardening, triple modular redundancy, fault tolerant software and shielding. I think we just lost the video. Is that me?
Yeah, wiggle the cable maybe?
Yeah, okay. Wait. We're good. Okay. I don't know what half of these things are, so if anyone here is an expert, I don't think we have time to talk about it now, but I'd love to hear about triple modular redundancy. Just to name a few, and I'm sure that there are plenty that I missed as well, but there have been reports that not all of these systems are incorporated, or not all these controls are incorporated into every system, so that's something we can probably save for another talk at another time. But I think you're asking then, okay, so if we have all this stuff, why are we talking about cosmic rays and bit flipping and stuff like that? And probably also, what does this have to do with cybersecurity? Absolutely nothing, so thanks for coming to my talk. No, of course this has to do with cybersecurity. And that's where Bitsquatting comes in, right? So Bitsquatting is registering bit-mangled versions of existing domain names to intercept victim traffic. It's similar to typo squatting, right, where somebody types in gopgol.com instead of google.com, right? Except for instead of depending on a human to make that error, we're counting on computers to make that error. And so I'm going to walk you through a lot about Bitsquatting here in a very short period of time. I think we've got about 15 minutes left. So we'll talk about how bit mangling happens. We'll talk about how bit mangling affects DNS systems, the different types of name mangles that you can expect, content path versus transit path, potential Bitsquatting attacks, mitigation efforts, and then we'll start looking at actual Bitsquatting attacks in the wild. And hopefully we'll get to talk about the landscape, how bad it can get, and what mitigations you can implement in order to protect against it. So let's get started with Bitsquatting itself. So that's where bits get flipped, right? Or bit mangling itself, sorry. That's where bits get flipped. And it can be caused by a lot of different things. It's actually not just radiation. And it's not just cosmic rays either. So it can be caused by environmental factors, such as temperature and humidity. It can be caused by manufacturing defects. It's important to note that one of the first talks about Bitsquatting, or the first time it was actually brought into the public, was by a researcher named Artem Dinaburg. And if you have the opportunity to go watch his DEF CON and Black Hat talks and read the paper that he published, you'll find that there's some really interesting stories about times when say like nuclear contaminated materials were used in producing computer chips, and if you can imagine, that's actually like really problematic, right? Like that's going to cause a lot of bit flips on a regular basis. And those chips went into production. They were sold on the consumer markets, and there are computers that are just notorious for having those issues. So manufacturing defects is a big one. And then we also have radiation, so electromagnetic interference, which can just happen in any environment, or high energy particles, which is something that a lot of times can permeate through just about any barrier you put in between. So with domain names, when you bit mangle a domain name, what you're looking for, what ends up happening is when you flip one of the bits, it causes a valid domain name character, right? So it's worth noting there are international domain names which complicate the issue a little bit. Right now we're just going to focus on domain names that use ASCII characters. So it's going to be alphanumerics, dashes, and then periods as delimiters. And it's also worth it to point out that the bit flip can happen in both directions of the alphabet, right? So you notice here, you start with the letter M, and then if we flip, I think the third bit there, it goes to capital M, right? We flip it from a 1 to a 0. If we flip the fifth bit over there, it turns into a lowercase e, right, which is a valid DNS character. And if we were to flip, so that was from a 1 to a 0, if we were to flip a 0 to a 1, it goes the other direction in the alphabet, right? So M's a great example because you can go both directions. And you can see here some of the potential flips for example.com, right? We have where the E turns into a D, the G turns into an A, et cetera, et cetera. So a little bit more about bit mangling domain names. Bit flips are also reversible, right? So if M turns into E, then E will also turn back into M, right? Mangled domains might also be unrecognizable. So you'll see one of the examples here that I have under weird stuff happening is anything.com turns into a.ything.com. And what you can do then is you can have a wildcard subdomain, so you'll just be able to take up any traffic that's going to ything.com if you have that registered. Another thing is just weird stuff happens, right? So here we have the period in www.example.com turning into wwnexample.com, right? And then also the slash can turn into a period too. So example.com/io can turn into example.com.io. So you can get creative with your domains that you're squatting. So if you're interested in trying this for yourself, you can even do it right now on your phone. I set up bitsquatting.net, and you can just go in there, type in a domain. Right now it doesn't take URLs, so it won't mangle slashes. But you can just go there, type in a domain, and check to see what all the different types of squattables are. It'll take subdomains too, but it only returns the fully qualified domain name. It'll only return that first domain and the TLD. And it checks for valid TLDs. I have a disagreement with it. I built it, but it and I disagree about whether .bomb is a valid TLD. It uses it, so that's up to you to use your own discretion. So let's talk about content path versus transit path, right? Content path, the blue line over here, that is application content. So what you're looking at there is if you have a website that has URLs in it, for instance, hyperlinks or scripts, or download scripts, then if it gets mangled before it goes into storage, then that could just be the content that your website is serving or your HTTP cache is serving all the time, right? So that mangled domain can just be there, and then if somebody were to purchase that and squat on it, then anytime you go to get that script or somebody clicks on that link, then that's just going to happen. Then the other side of it is the DNS resolution path, and that's the one that I like to focus on a little bit more because realistically the content path is a little bit more protected. It's less likely because it's not in transit on these unprotected systems as frequently. But the DNS resolution path, DNS traffic is really high frequency, right? And a lot of times what you end up with is this going over network equipment that might not be well shielded. It might not have error correcting memory in them. It might be made with like faulty chips or something like that. Or it might be running in a data center or a closet that doesn't even have air conditioning. It's one thing that happened that actually Artem Dinaburg points out in his presentation is that the Google data centers, they had tried to cut costs and be more like environmentally friendly by cutting down on the air conditioning and raising the temperature of the data centers to 80 degrees. And he goes into a whole discussion of the impact of raising the data center temperature to 80 degrees and how that changes how frequently bit mangling actually occurs. But it's a pretty big effect. And so when your traffic is going over unknown devices and unknown data centers and you don't have any control over that, then you actually do run a pretty big risk of mangles happening. It increases the risk pretty dramatically. So what can we bit squat against? What kind of traffic might we look at? It's pretty much anything that uses anything that uses domain names for identifying the host that it's communicating with, right? Which is almost all of the internet. HTTP and FTP traffic, for instance, SMTP, POP, IMAP, and XMPP for email and messaging. And then the basic infrastructure stuff, DNS, NTP, LDAP. If you don't know these acronyms, it's totally fine. You're not missing out on much. But this is pretty much the core of what we're trying to accomplish here. Yeah, so literally any internet infrastructure is probably going to be somewhat susceptible to bit squatting. What makes a good target, if you notice on that previous slide, nothing that I listed there was the encrypted version of those protocols, right? And that's because encryption and signing are two things that really do eliminate the likelihood of bit squatting working properly, because if you have to use a certificate, it's going to try to identify that host, and the host names aren't going to match up. And then you want it to use DNS for host identification. And then you want something that's high traffic, because the higher the frequency of the DNS requests, then the higher the likelihood that you're going to get bit flips in the actual DNS requests, right? So there's a huge caveat here to content stored with the mangled domain will actually validate with a certificate registered with the mangled name, right? So like if I register gopgol.com and I have a signing certificate for it, right? Then anything where the server actually has stored in the application, it's stored gopgol.com, say like to look for a script or as a hyperlink or something like that. Then when somebody clicks on that, if I've set it up to spoof to google.com, then it'll look for the gopgol.com certificate. So it'll work, right? And that works perfectly fine. That's the one time that the content path is really much more effective than the DNS path, because it just skips right over that certificate signing issue. So what are the mitigation efforts that we typically see, right? We see encryption, signing, like I mentioned before. There's proactive registration, domain registration controls, legislation, firewalls, all this kind of stuff. We'll get back to this a little bit towards the end. So I'm just going to skip over these for now, but I think you get the point here. So looking at the current landscape, right? What's the good stuff? So HTTPS is practically everywhere, and we have the EFF to thank for this. So thanks to the EFF for their HTTPS Everywhere campaign, and for really pushing the internet to a higher standard here and making everything more secure. Really reduced, if you look at the results from Artem's research, and then if you look at, I'm not going to show the results today from mine because we unfortunately don't have enough time. But if we were to look at the results from my research compared to his, what you find is that the amount of traffic that you can actually see nowadays is pretty much none of the web content traffic anymore, unless it's the content path where you have that like the stored mangled domain. In his research, there was HTTP, there was SMTP, there's IMAP, there's POP, there's all kinds of content traffic that you were able to access before. Another thing that's really great, a few companies have been really good at proactive registration. Google is one of the best. They're at like 90-something%, having registered all the potentially like squattable domains. And typo squatting protection in browsers is super common. So you see here when I was testing, I had purchased opefai.com, and it already knew. It was like, don't you want to go to openai.com? Which I did. And so that is pretty effective, although realistically once you start talking, like that works for the content path attack, but it doesn't really help you on the transit side. So let's look at the bad, right? We definitely need more encryption and signing in DNS. There's like 6 different methods that we can use to protect DNS, like DNS over HTTPS. We can use DNSSEC. We can use signed DNS, and there's a couple other like encrypted DNS protocols. If we were to use those, then the DNS attack would have a lot less veracity to it, right? Now you see here, I tried to register Windows update nmicrosoft.com, right? That would be a great one to have. And it told me that registering that domain is banned. What do you think I did? I just went to a different registrar and registered it. It didn't stop me. So this is one that just doesn't work, right? Point of sale restrictions really have no effect. And if you look, there's another Microsoft domain there that I was able to register. And you see Yoktube it's a squat for YouTube. And it actually, I think, not Yoktube, Gopgol. Gopgol is one that is actually a typo squat and a Bitsquat at the same time. So you get kind of both types of traffic. So once again, this whole thing with point of sale restrictions, like it tried to explain to me, that I wasn't able to register because of different restrictions. And like that works for protecting the registrar, but it doesn't actually protect you as a company, right? So even if you have an agreement with whatever registrar this is, I don't know if their name's up there, but even if you have an agreement with them that they're not going to sell anyone a domain with your name in it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be able to buy it. They'll just buy it somewhere else. All right, so what's really bad? Out of 80 major corporations and internet infrastructure organizations that I checked, I found 400 domains, right? 13,000 squattable domains, which goes to show that there's a lot of subdomain usage. There's a lot of long domain names, which gives you a lot more opportunities for squattables, right? 1,800 of the squattables were registered, and only 1,300 of those actually matched the registrar, the name server, the destination IP of the company that the target domain name belonged to, right? So what that means is, for many of these companies up here, at least in 500 cases, if not significantly more, right, there are people that have registered domain names that are squattable domains of these, and they're probably listening to traffic, right? They're not just registering and sitting on it. They're not hoping that Microsoft is going to buy that domain back off of them. There's a high likelihood that they're actually listening to the traffic. And I went through, once again, just not enough time or space for this, but I went through and I looked at all of the domains that were registered, or all the domains that were registered, looked at the IP addresses, and found that a lot of them are registered overseas. There are some that are even registered in Iran. There are some that are registered in China. It's surprising. Right, yeah, exactly. Thanks. So, and then here's what's really ugly, right? Of the root servers .NET variants, only 2 were not registered, which actually, hopefully that means that these organizations have registered them. None of them actually matched the information of the target domain, right? So that means that of all the potential root server squads, at least a significant portion of those are owned by third parties that are not these organizations. And if you look at the list of organizations, those are pretty big names, right? And this represents an attack vector that would affect the entire internet, right? So there's some portion of internet traffic that is accidentally going to these malicious squatting servers. Of the subdomain variants like a.rootservers.net, which would be like anrootservers.net, all of them were available for purchase. None of them are available for purchase anymore, if you know what I mean. So I've reached out to see if anyone's interested in having them back, and there has not been interest yet. So I continue to just sit on those ones. And that also includes TLD root zones as well. There's opportunity there to squat those domains as well. So let's talk about root servers. It's not as bad as it seems. Typically with most, so this is bind 9, I think. Typically with most root server applications, or with most DNS server applications, it comes with the root servers preloaded in there, right? So it would only be if you had like a homebrew, or if you're using some not quite mature DNS server application, or if you had removed these because you wanted your root server or your DNS server to dynamically look for the root servers. Then we start talking about it actually being squattable and that traffic potentially being sent to the malicious server. We're out of time now, so I have packets to prove it. We can talk about that in another conversation. Reach out to me if you're interested. I did have to, of course, redact a lot of that. So what can we do? Security is best in layers, right? We want hardware protections, shielding, ECC, which is error correcting chips, right? We want redundancy, encryption, signing, proactive registration, web application firewalls, and application monitoring are all great ways to protect yourself and your organization. What doesn't work, right? Legal deterrence does nothing, right? There's an opportunity to sue people that have a domain name that has your trademark in it, but realistically, there's a very slim number of lawsuits that have ever happened that have ever been successful at that. And in most cases, most of these organizations are overseas, right? So you're not really going to be able to go bring a lawsuit against somebody who's not part of the various agreements. Then point of sale limitations obviously doesn't work, right? If I couldn't register it with an American company, I could just go to a company in another country and register the domain name with them. Registration requirements, same thing. If you're just doing one mitigation, if you just have ECC, it's not going to fix it, right? Because you're going to be sending your network traffic over other people's equipment as well. And security through ignorance, if you think that works, then you don't belong in this room. So some last thoughts, right? When in doubt, lawyer up. This is just general advice. It's not specific to this. If you're ever working on research and you're like, I don't know what I should be doing, or I don't know if this is legal or safe, there's a lot of organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation or just friends. There's lots of like legal friends in the hacker spaces. Send it out on a Discord and ask, hey, does anyone know a lawyer I can talk to about this? But the Electronic Frontier Foundation is here specifically for this kind of stuff. They also have technical resources that can help you with your research if you need it. There's also great community groups like BurbSec in Chicago. Where's my BurbSec folks? Yeah, all right. Yeah, great community groups like BurbSec. And if you don't have one, then you should start one. Special interest groups like Women in Security and Privacy, if you're looking for it. I know there's a bunch of other great special interest groups for different people. The Women in Security and Privacy offers scholarships if you're looking to go to DEF CON and you need help being able to afford the flights, the hotels, the conference tickets. If you want contact information for somebody there, then I can help you get in touch. You don't have to be a cybersecurity professional to be a hacker, and you don't have to be a hacker to hang out with us. So if you're ever in Chicago and you want to come hang out with BurbSec, feel free to join us. But also just in general, I worked in cybersecurity previously, and I'm always curious about it. So I'm more of a lurker, would you say, than a cybersecurity professional, but still consider myself a hacker. Build first, ask questions later. If you don't negotiate your compensation, then you're not getting paid what you're worth. And if you saw a domain that looks like yours or your employer's, hit me up. I'm not trying to hold these things for any kind of nefarious purposes. Most of the domains are registered with TXT records that say, if this domain looks like it should belong to you, then reach out to me and let me know. Happy to transfer them for free if you cover the costs. Here's references if somebody wants to take a picture of that really quickly. There's also the link to the Radiolab episode is on here, as well as that bitsquatting.net calculator, if you're interested in trying this out for yourself. Also, if you work for an organization that has domains, go on bitsquatting.net, find all the squattable domains for your organization, and go ahead and buy them. It'll cost you a couple $100s to get all the domains, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's done. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, everybody. I don't think we have time for questions, but I'll be off to the side. Thanks.